Celine Song is the writer, director, and executive producer of the film Past Lives. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Celine, this film is such a powerful meditation on love and of the passage of time. I wanted to start by asking you, what do you find so powerful about first love and why it kind of lingers in us and endures over the course of years?
Well, I think that it is just like any kind of a first encounter with something is out to leave an impact. And by the way, it may not for you. Maybe your first love experience isn't something that you think about very much or you feel very connected to. But I think that in the case of these two people that were in the movie, it felt very special. And I think that it was in part helped by the fact that she effectively disappeared. She left her life. And in that way, it's almost as though she's passed, right? So there is an amazing thing where I feel like there is a bit of a shock to that. And I think that makes the relationship feel more intense, because that's just how we respond to things, I think, as people.
Yeah, absolutely. This is your first feature film. When you had this idea to write this story, which is based on, a moment in your life, how did you know that it was the right story to do for your first feature? Did you consider, writing it as a stage play? I know you have a background in playwriting. So how did you know that this was the right story for your first film?
Well, I think that I just knew that it needed to be told cinematically because of the way that time and space works in the film. So because it spans decades and continents, and I've told this joke before, but it's that the villain of the story is the 24 years and the Pacific Ocean. So it actually is important for Seoul and New York and the 12-year-old kid and the 40-year-old adults, for all of them to coexist literally, and for them to be cast and shot, and they have to sort of be seen visually and on site. So I think that really was what motivated it being a cinematic story, because I think that in theater, because time and space is figurative, it wouldn't have felt as devastating, I think, to experience Seoul and New York that way, or the 12-year-old kid or a 40-year-old adult that way. But I think that, if you ask me like how I knew that this was going to be my first movie, I really didn't. The truth is that there were so many reasons to believe that this wasn't going to be a movie that anybody was going to make, because I wrote this in 2018, and the truth is that was before Parasite won and had an amazing life in the US, because there's a real thing of like people, the idea of a bilingual film or a movie with subtitles was it wasn't as clear of a thing that you could ask the audience to watch. And then, of course, there's a question of like, well, it is a movie that is set in two countries. So how much is it going to be to make it? So there are things like that. So there's so many ways in which that like it was being told to me that maybe it wasn't a movie that people would want to make. So I didn't think that as I was writing it, like, man, this is going to be my first movie. I think I was just like, at the end of the day, like, I come from theater, where basically, in theater, you write a lot of things without thinking that it's gonna get made. So it was a little bit of like, oh, fuck it. Let me just do it and see if people either want to make it or at least read it, treat it as a spec, and hire me to write something else, right? Yeah.
You mentioned your background in theater, and obviously the film is based on kind of that opening scene of the film is the kernel of the idea that happened in your real life. But I wanted to ask you about kind of creating Nora as a character, because there's obviously a bit of overlap with your experience and hers, but how did you kind of meet Nora on the page, and what did you really want to make different about Nora from your life experience?
Well, I think that, there are some ways that it is going to be defined by the actress that you're working with. Because the truth is that when Nora walked in, when Greta walked in for Nora, you see me confusing, it's perfect. So when Greta walked in to audition for Nora, because that's what she did, she walked into my Zoom room to audition. And when I saw her, I think that the feeling I had was not like, well, here's somebody who is going to play a character that's inspired by, it was more like, oh, here comes Nora. it's amazing. Oh, wow, is this Nora? So I think that really is what the relationship that I have to Nora is. So much of it is about, well, yeah, but this character has to go through things, structured and in a way, in a way through artifice, because it's art making, right? Because at the end of the day, a film is a piece of art. It's not actually a diary, right? So some of it is like, well, it's not a documentary. So you have to sort of say like, yeah, part of this art that I want to make, is she the right character for that? And I think that's was my relationship to Greta as Nora. And so much of how that character came to grow in her performance was in the way that Greta and I met together on the script, yeah.
I want to dive into specific moments of the film and your visual style. So to do that, I wanted to first ask about what were did you have influences when you knew you were going to, translate this to the screen? What were there films, filmmakers, anything that you really wanted to kind of draw on for inspiration to kind of become a visual storyteller with the camera?
Well, I think that I could talk about many different movies that have been sort of mentioned in connection to the film before, like the Before trilogy or like the In the Mood for Love and all of those movies. But I really do think of them as more like in the lineage that it exists, luckily, more than really thinking about them as like, well, that was the movie that I wanted to make. Because I think part of the being a first-time filmmaker is that I had a little chip on my shoulder about the movie having a language of its own, or trying to discover in this process what my voice is as a filmmaker, because I think that felt really important to do. So I think I was thinking a little bit less about those movies, and of course I love those movies, and I've seen those movies. So it's not quite like that, but it's more like, well, actually, what is this story asking for? What kind of storytelling is this? Does this story want, right? So what kind of visual storytelling? So I think that from there we were just pulling from different movies and different moments in different movies as a way to sort of anchor and what I call problem solve. Because every day the way I would call the way that I call my script is it's a book of problems, right? And every day on set you're just showing up to solve the problem that the script has posed, right? And you're trying to solve it as elegantly and as efficiently as you can manage, right? And some days you kill it, and some days you're like, well, that was a little weaker, But I think that either way, you're just kind of going through it in a way where you're just every day showing up to problem solving that way. So the script is a problem, and often you can find the solutions in other people's movies, the movies that I love so much. And so, for example, like I think I asked everyone to watch, and I was looking at my Dinner with Andre as a kind of a reference point for the final scene in the bar. Or, there is and sometimes it wouldn't even be movies. It'd be like, the Marina Abramovic's The Artist Present. I asked when my actors, Teo and Greta, asked me about that scene in rehearsal. We all got together around my laptop, and we just watched the video of that, because we're talking about what it is like to be reconnected with somebody that that you're not right for in this life, right? That you're not going to get together with in this life. So I think that it's something like that. Of course, in the opening shot where Nora turns to camera, it's from the breaking the waves. The Emily has this amazing look to the camera that I think Greta and I were looking at. So they're just, and of course, like father, like son. The ending is this walk, this amazing walk where this little boy is running away from the father, and the father is following him. And I think that really was a big inspiration for the final scene of the film. So I think that I could talk about, I think it's more like, it's less like 2 movies or something. It's more like it's a very long list of movies and images, and sometimes nonfiction too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lifetime of movie experience that comes into play, and some beautiful films that
Yes.
you've cited. I want to ask you about one of the earliest shots in the film that really moved me is, of course, that scene at 12 years old when they say goodbye, the first goodbye, and Nora's up the stairs, just beautiful. How long did you have that kind of visual in your head when you were writing the screenplay, or was that something like a location that you found and knew that would be perfect for the moment? or was that an image that you really, had kind of envisioned as you were writing the script?
Well, I think that we were always talking about a fork in the road, right? Or some kind of a way that we're turning in and out of turning away from each other. So I think that we had a kind of and I say we because it's, collaboration between me, my production designer, and my DP. And we always talked about some kind of an architecture like that. And of course, it's being built out of the script where the architecture is built into it. So I think we were like kind of vaguely looking for a fork in the road, right? We're like, so, and then until you get to the location, you don't know. So actually the Korean, where the children say goodbye, because we shot the movie first in New York, and then we went to Korea, we prepped it, and then we shot for 10 days in Korea. So it was I would call it like a glorious pickup, glorified pickup, not glorious and glorious, but glorious and glorified pickup, which is that in New York, we had shot most of the film, and then we're actually going to Korea to find images and moments to fill in to the gaps that were missing from the movie. Because the Skype section, we actually built the sets for the Skype section. So even that, we shot in New York. So in Korea, one of the biggest scenes there was to find this fork in the road. And already we knew what the image of the walk home at the end of the film, where Haesung and Nora say goodbye for the final time, we already had shot that, right? And we already knew, I already even had it edited with my editor. So we already knew what that shot was going to be. So, and we knew that we need to find something that matches it, right? And of course, we didn't want it to match it in such a clean way, but we wanted it to feel like it is in direct conversation and holding hands with that particular image. So both times, both the street that where we shot the ending and also this fork in the road that the kids walk away from, both of them came from my DP, Xavier, because we knew what the streets needed to be. But the thing that I'm asking for the streets is contradictory, because I'm saying it has to be, these streets have to feel like only a New Yorker or a Seoulite can know what the street is, because it's a personal space. Like, are you in New York or are you in LA?
New York.
Yeah. Well, like if you think about like a New Yorker, it's like, well, when you think about New York, you're not going to think about the places that are touristy. You're not going to say, what my New York is? Empire State Building. Like, we're just not going to feel that way, right? We're just going to be like, I don't go to, when I went to Paris, I'm like, not a single person here, when they ask like, what is your Paris? They wouldn't say Eiffel Tower, right? So it has to be something that has to feel like someone who lives there for a long time, who loves the city because they love it enough to live here. And they're going to, for them, it's going to be a really special place, but it's not going to look like anything to a tourist. So tourists will just walk right by without taking a photo. So it has to be this ordinary, very like everyday, totally mundane space. And then it also had to be contradictorily a space that was extraordinary, beautiful, has to contain the whole movie. We have to be heartbroken but just by looking at it, right? That kind of a thing. So it was a contradictory thing that was very difficult to then ask the location team to find. Because, and of course, something that my DP Xavier did is that he went out after we had a whole day at work. He went out to just like hit East Village. He just walked around. He walked around with me. He walked around with our gaffer. He walked around with our AD. He would just, my line producer, he would just walk around the streets just until he saw something, right? And he, of course, I mean, he called me and he said, I think I found the street, then I was like, I fucking believe you. So I went and I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is a street. It is completely mundane and totally extraordinary. And because this has worked in New York City, when I went to Korea, we did the same thing, because we were seeing all these locations, because our instruction to them was that fork in the road, right? And of course, we had many different forks in the roads that were cool, but none of them was, it gave us the inspiration. It didn't inspire me in a way where it made me go like, this is the fucking street. So what ended up happening is that my DP was, again, he was jet lagged as hell. And he was just out there one morning, just like walking around, until we found something. And I remember him, I wasn't there because I think I was quarantining, but I remember him telling me that it was crazy because he was just walking around and then he just like turned around the way that he came down and he saw the fork in the road, you know, and he was like, holy shit, it was so crazy. And I think that really is how we found it. So I think that when it comes to what the shot has to be, or what the moment has to be, it is very clear. And I know already, and everybody on the team knows already what it has to be. But what the thing it is always going to be something ephemeral, right? Because, you know, I couldn't describe to you why that fork works, right? But we all know it does. And now the audience knows it does. Now the audience is like, that's a perfect location, right? And like, how do we all know that? Well, we all know that because at the end of the day, it does come down to story and character. And then when it's story and character, we'll always answer the question, is this perfect for the movie? And the answer is going to be yes to every single person, including eventually the audience. The audience is going to see that fork in the road and be like, I can't imagine them shooting this any other place, right? It's inevitable. It's like destined, right? Yeah.
It is. It is. No, it is. It's a perfect kind of encapsulation of the message of the film. And another shot I find really, or location I find similar in that sense, but in a different way, is the carousel where Nora and Haesung, you know, spend time. What was most exciting to you about that carousel, sitting the characters there, having that kind of go by behind them? Because I do think it really speaks to the message of the film in a different way from the fork in the road, but in an equally kind of beautiful and evocative manner.
You're so right, because it is exactly inspired by it's like the poetic truth of that moment, right? Because of course, carousel is meant to imply some kind of childhood, and there are children playing in the carousel, and it's turning. And what's amazing about that particular carousel is that it's by the ocean, and to protect it from the ocean, it has a glass enclosure that is beautifully protected from the sea itself. And the thing is, like, if you were to hear all of those things, there is a way in which that just speaks to exactly where Haesung and Nora are in that moment. And that moment was scripted for that reason, because I always knew that was one of the locations, because there are some locations that shifted. Madison Square Park was going to be actually at MoMA. You know, there are some locations that ended up moving. They're like, well, we're supposed to shoot here and we didn't. But that was one of those locations that I'm like, no, we have to shoot there, because it actually it is the kind of place that you would take your tourist friend. But also it has this really beautiful structure that we have to shoot in front of, because their conversation is about the way that this child selves are playing in their minds, but they're not the reality, right? They're not the reality. And there has to be something delicate. There is something really delicate about this glass enclosure. It's like it's caged in there, right? It's not quite free and floating and everything. And also the other of that amazing part is the carousel looks like not even spectacular against how spectacular New York City is, right? Because New York City, you just go to there and you're just like, I love New York. It's such an incredible view. And this carousel feels so small, amazingly, even though it's a very big carousel. It feels like such a small thing in this little glass box, right? And it's trying to protect itself from the ocean winds. Yeah. So I mean, I think you're talking about the exact thing. So again, whether you're thinking about all that or not, I think that that's the symbol of it, or the feeling of it, or the subconscious way that you're registering those symbols is going to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, before I let you go, Celine, I know you've said that the hardest shot was probably Nora looking directly to camera in that opening scene.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, though, what is your favorite shot or scene or sequence that, when you look back on the experience and on the film, you're most proud of?
I think I would say that the very final scene where they're walking home. So where she is walking him to the Uber, and then she walks home. I think that really is the moment that I knew that the movie was going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, okay, we're going to be okay. You know, that's really the feeling of it. But I think that, you know, when it comes to the thing that I knew, but the truth is that that scene to me inspires so much uncertainty and even terror about whether we're going to be able to pull this off, right? Because it's like the getting to that street was miraculous. Clearing all those buildings and laying 150 feet of track in the middle of New York City Road. And we were also shooting this in a East Village on a Friday night, which I know you're a New Yorker, so you know exactly what that means, right? It means literally just outside of the frame, there was a zoo, like just very drunk zoo just outside. So there's so many things that were impossible in that night. And at that night, so to me, the reason why I feel so much for it is because of the miraculousness of it. But of course, I think that the part of it that as myself as an artist who is just like making something, the moment that I felt the most proud of, because it really was elbow grease kinds of thing. And of course, it's not just my elbow grease, it's the elbow grease of my crew, of course, but really my actors, is a scene in the bar, right? Because it was 2 nights of really intense emotional work. And it really was like we were cooking with gas. It was that thing. It would really felt like it was a accumulation of all the work that I've been doing with the actors to build these characters, and they were all coming together in this beautiful way where they were just killing it, and we were all killing it together. And I think that really was something that almost as a class person I was so thrilled by, so I would say, I should say that's my favorite scene.
Well, congratulations on a truly
Thank you.
extraordinary film. Thank you
you.
so much for talking to Gold Ruby today, Celine.
Thank you so much. Thank you for talking to me. This was such a good conversation.